Good morning, mention and other fine folks to the Someday Dispatch of the Black Letter, where we contemplate thoughts worth thinking, and there's a whole bunch of thoughts thinking today. These are some of my thoughts I've been thinking about as the world remains upside down in the topsy-turvy with a top hat on. Something interesting, I'm a big proponent of privacy. It's actually an area I work in, my real job. Spies can eavesdrop by watching a light bulb's variations. Technique allows for real-time listening in on a room hundreds of feet away. There's been a whole bunch of different techniques like this. You can listen to sound vibrating window panes, for example, but here's another one that I thought was quite interesting. The list of sophisticated eavesdropping techniques has grown steadily over the years. Wiretaps, hacked phones, bugs in the wall, even bouncing lasers off a building's glass to pick up conversations inside. Now add another tool for audio spies. Any light bulb in a room that might be visible from a window. They call it lamp phone. They say it allows anyone with a laptop and less than $1,000 of equipment, just a telescope and a $400 electro-optical sensor, to listen in on any sounds in a room that's hundreds of feet away in real time simply by observing the minuscule vibration those sounds create on the glass surface of a light bulb inside. So, this is crazy, and it goes on to explain, I guess, in more detail how it works, which is a little bit beyond my which is a little bit above my pay scale, but it's fascinating how these things are becoming more and more prevalent. There's just a whole bunch of different ways that researchers are figuring out ways of spying on us, and obviously this is going to get into nefarious hands, and by nefarious hands I mean the government generally. So we have to be cognizant of that. That's why I think privacy is so important. Not necessarily because we have anything to hide per se, but it gives us control over autonomy and what we want to share with people, and that should give us that should be the foundation of a democracy. Frankly, being able to disclose what you want, when you want, to whom. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, something to think about, folks. Privacy is important, and we obviously need to protect that as much as we can, as they continue to try to chip away at it. The virus will win. Americans are pretending that the pandemic is over. It certainly is not. So the second wave of the coronavirus is on the way. When it arrives, we will lack the will to deal with it. Despite all the sacrifices of the past months, the virus is likely to win, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that it already has. The disease is slowly starting to recede from the public's attention, and I can see this too, and I'm sure you guys can when you're out and about. There's a lot of folks out there that just don't seem to be that concerned about it anymore, and I understand, it's hard to be cooped up at home all the time, especially if you don't live with people that you particularly like or love, for example. But of course, all these protests as well, that's probably going to bring in a spike of new cases. And then, of course, the fall and winter is when we are also very concerned about the second wave coming, and that would certainly be reminiscent of the Spanish flu, which I think went into 1918, 1919, and the second wave was even worse than the first. It says a vaccine is, even if we get lucky, many months away from deployment. Because the virus is spreading especially rapidly in parts of the southern hemisphere from Latin America to Africa, heat is clearly no impediment to its dissemination. Perhaps most importantly, it is now difficult to imagine that anybody could muster the political will to impose a full-scale lockdown for a second time. As one poll in Pennsylvania found, nearly 9 out of 10 Republicans trusted the information you hear about the coronavirus from medical experts back in April, but now just about 1 in 3 does. So obviously this is becoming a real concern. People are getting fed up. I think there's also just generally a lack of distrust in the officials and the government. They haven't been telling us the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, which is creating, I think, some lack of support, or at least trust in what officials are saying. I'm certainly feeling it. I feel like we've been managed and manipulated, and trying to downplay what the situation is on the street, boots on the ground, but it's not helpful. Folks can handle the truth, you just give it to them. And here's a list of individuals and institutions who have helped to get us into this mess. And so he goes on to say, or she goes on to say, if the virus wins, it's because the World Health Organization downplayed the threat for far too long, and arguably the WHO does need to take some responsibility for that. Donald Trump was more interested in hushing up bad news that might hurt the economy than saving American lives. That is also true. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, has proved to be too bureaucratic and incompetent to do its job. That's also accurate in my opinion. The White House did not even attempt to put a test and trace regime into place at the federal level, and that's also true. It's a long article, but it's very interesting. And it ends with a sentence. Pandemics reveal the true state of a society. Ours has come up badly wanting. And that's true, folks. We need to get a handle on this. I know it's difficult and frustrating, but I just encourage everyone to continue to wash your hands regularly. Try not to touch your face. Wear a mask if you're out and about if you can. It is helpful. And other than that, just be cognizant of your surroundings, and especially your loved ones. You might be young or not even young, but healthy and fit, and perhaps this will be nothing more than a bad cold or flu for you, but there are others that can certainly be taken down by this, so we need to be aware of that and respectful of each other and help each other through this whole process. $600 unemployment benefits are life-saving for this waiter. I'm right at the edge. Here he is. Matt Marfoglia is a waiter at the Tasting Kitchen in Los Angeles, was furloughed in March. The enhanced unemployment benefits are helping him make ends meet financially, but they may end after July. The one thing that's keeping him afloat is the extra $600 a week in federal unemployment. He's getting about $1,000 a month. $1,000 a week now. Before that, he was making $5,600 after taxes. It says further down here that's after taxes, which is a hell of a good wage. And I think America has been living high on the hog for a long time, primarily at the expense of other countries, particularly probably the developing world, because of the American use of the world currency, the US dollar. I think it's given many Americans a false sense of entitlement and lifestyle that is not congruent with actually what's going on in the rest of the world. I mean, $1,000 a week, I'd be lucky to be earning that here, and this is in Canada. $1,000 a week after taxes is a very good wage. Hell, $5,600 a week after taxes, that's probably here about $7,000 a month. And of course we're talking about US dollars, not these Canadian pesos that I have to get paid in. So that's a great wage. I don't make anywhere near $5,600 net each month, not even 4,000 US net each month either. So I think Americans have a great incongruent sense of what real wages and salaries are for the rest of the world. I mean, when a waiter can earn, $5,600, let's call that seven. Let's make that about 85, 90,000 a year. As a waiter, arguably not a highly trained or educated role. I think that just shows you how rich America is generally, even though there's a lot of people earning very little money. Here's the jobless rate compared to the Great Depression level. You can see up at 14.7, and then with the massaged numbers that we're now at 13.3, when in fact we're actually up around Great Depression levels, in my opinion. And that'll become apparent in time as they have the hindsight to look at the numbers more accurately and figure it out. The $600 enhancement aimed at fully replacing prior wages for the average worker, which was about $1,000 a week, right? Researchers at the Friedman Institute for Economics at the University of Chicago found that about 2/3 of workers eligible to collect unemployment insurance can receive benefits that exceed lost earnings. So perhaps that's part of the problem, is that folks are getting paid more than they were when they were working. And this is a problem because it suggests that perhaps either your unemployment benefits are too generous, or the wages you're paying people are too small, too stingy. And I would say it's probably the latter. About half of US population is jobless. This is the employment population ratio since 1948. You can see this is the lowest it's been in over 75 years or so. Marcus is a different fella. A food server at Boston area Marriott Hotel who was furloughed in March would get about $300 a week from Massachusetts unemployment system, absent the extra benefits. So obviously with the $600 extra, he's doing quite well. This is the wage replacement, varies by occupation, and you can see that full wage replacement of folks that earn all these folks from up here. Excuse me. So from about dancers and choreographers up to shampooers, all these folks are making more on unemployment and the wage replacement, and then the rest of them. So you can see a good chunk of these example roles are making more on their wage replacement unemployment. Massachusetts is among the most generous states, pays up to $1,200 a week to recipients. That's more than I make in just at my job. It's a lot of money. I think Americans don't realize how well they live, comparatively speaking, compared to the rest of the world. No wonder they have McMansions and huge cars and SUVs, etc., etc. Now, I'm not bemoaning the fact that Americans are making this kind of money. It's served everyone well. Everyone, in this particular case, I think rising tide has risen all boats, or has buoyed all boats. But at the same time, I think there's going to be a reset, and people are talking about a reset where things are going to have to flatten out, and everybody's going to have to move to somewhat of a more normal, reasonable sharing of global wealth. About 46% of people who make more than $75,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck, or spend more than their means. I don't make that amount of money in US dollars, that's for sure. And 46% of them are living paycheck to paycheck. That's astonishing. That means just over half know how to balance a budget and live within their means. No wonder the whole global world is in such a catastrophe, when the man on the street has no idea how to live modestly on a decent salary, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that goes into a lot of other things, and making more on unemployment. You can see at least 25% of people, except in the DC area, at least 25 to up to 50% people in Arizona are making more on unemployment. Foglia made roughly $5,600 a month after taxes while employed. I mean, that's a hell of a good wage for anyone, especially for a role that doesn't arguably need a higher education, like a university degree, right? The average unemployment benefits, average weekly payments, $1,000, Hawaii, $1,100. $1,100. I tell you what, those are US dollars. Here in Canada, I think the most you can make is about just over 500. I think between 500 and 600 a week. That's the maximum you can make on unemployment, and that's Canadian pesos, right? That's roughly half of what a lot of folks are in the States are making. Anyway, good for Marfoglia and the rest of them. It's going to create a problem, obviously, for people trying to get back to work if they're earning more off of unemployment. I think part of the problem is there's such a disparity, particularly in the United States. Those that earn very little and those that earn a lot. I mean, people making $100,000 for doing, arguably not very important or crucial work, but there you have it. It shows us where our priorities are. I'm not going to bemoan that fact, but I think we have to start looking at this and how the whole disparity is happening. And I think people are starting to see through the fog here, to realize that we have to own this and to change how we do this. And I think that's what some of the rioting and protesting is about as well. This great inequality, the amount of money that's been printed and sent to the banksters and other gangsters. I think people are fed up with the inequality, and as they should be. Investors are now buying Ethereum at a 750% premium, a smart investment or Robinhood-esque fear of missing out. Ethereum demand is surging if Grayscale's data is considered. Grayscale is an investment trust, as you can see here. It's now pegged at a massive 750% premium. So if you want to buy, and Grayscale usually just handles investments in cryptocurrencies for other big whales, other smart money or hedge funds, for example. So Ether sold by Grayscale Investment Trust is now pegged at a massive 750% premium, which means that if you buy Ether through Grayscale, for example, you're paying $2,095, which is just ridiculous. I can't believe it, right? Here you can see that number, the 46% above ETH's all-time high. It's astonishing. So it's an implied price of almost $2,100. So folks are thinking that it's going to come down a possible plunge, for example, but it could be a possible plunge there. But really, if we're only paying maybe just over 12, 13, 15% of that, then this is not going to really be an issue for us. But it goes to show you how much interest there is in perhaps smart money and big money, the whales and hedge funds, that they're willing to pay a 750% premium. I think this is just getting started for cryptocurrencies. 80% of Ether supply and profit leads of fears of a price drop. Now, I wasn't quite sure what they mean by in profit, like are people staking their Ether and making money from that sort of as interest? But I think what this really means is that people who have bought Ether are now seeing that their Ether is worth more than what they paid for it. So that's what they're suggesting, that last time the Ethereum supply and profit was significantly above 80%, ETH was priced at around $700. So arguably this could be going much higher, or we could be in for a correction. Regardless, it's just good news all around, I think, for those of us who are hodling or holding long term. Liquidations may loom as altcoin bulls hold despite shorts spiking. Shorts always spike when things become more interesting, more mainstream. So I'm not sure this is really anything about the value of altcoins, because most altcoins, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, Bitcoin, Ether, for example, I think, certainly Ripple, Stellar, some of those, Litecoin, are all at relatively low valuations compared to their all-time highs. But here it talks about altcoin bears are quickly emerging from the woods with shorts against many top altcoins piling up quickly amid Bitcoin's recent drop. The BTC shakeout saw long positions on Bitfinex plummet by over 10%, dropping from 28,800 to roughly less than 26,000. BTC USD short positions also saw an increase of nearly 16%. So they're expecting Bitcoin to go down, and it might. I think we could see probably into the fall, perhaps even to next spring, Bitcoin and other altcoins sort of coming down. Perhaps we might even have a chance to get Bitcoin at about $6,000 again. I certainly would be happy with that. Might even be able to save up, and depending on how long it stays that way, save up enough to get perhaps a half a Bitcoin or something. Why Bitcoin is a silent protest against corrupt governments everywhere. This is a really great article from Forbes, and Tatiana Kaufman did a fantastic job of explaining why. As peaceful protests deteriorated into riots, it became clear that people were not just upset about racism, they were fed up with the abuse of authority that has pervaded modern society. One anti-authoritarian community stood up in solidarity and tweeted, "Bitcoin is a peaceful protest." That's true. Bitcoin is a protest against corruption. Bitcoin is a tool for freeing humanity from oligarchs and tyrants and banksters and other gangsters dressed up as get-rich-quick scheme. Bitcoin has a much higher rate of adoption in countries that have a history of government oppression, such as Germany, China, Venezuela. And he talks about an example from Greg from Ukraine. When Ukraine went into civil war, he had kept most of his savings in US dollars, decided to trade it all for Bitcoin. He memorized the 12 words from his seed phrase, like his life depended on, and ran with nothing but a small backpack on his person, managing to escape with all of his wealth intact. I mean, Bitcoin is crucial, folks. Here in the Western world, arguably, we're lucky. We haven't really had much hardships like much of the world has had, like Eastern Europeans have had. So perhaps we don't understand how crucial Bitcoin is moving forward, I think, as a store of value for a lot of people. Skeptics often use the argument that Bitcoin isn't backed by anything, but this is an inherently privileged North American view. Bitcoin is backed by a demand for financial freedom, for an asset outside the control of governments, and one that cannot be confiscated easily. And what is fiat backed by? Just the heavy boot and gun of a government? I don't like that one much better either. America is not immune to our financial revolution. America's fiat currency is only about 50 years old, and fiat has already failed in other nation states like Venezuela and Zimbabwe. In fact, if you listen to Mike Maloney and watch his history of money secrets, all fiat currencies have failed. History has shown us that a sudden influx of new money without any corresponding economic growth leads to inflation, a rise in prices coupled with a fall in the purchasing power of that currency. And that's what we're seeing right now, of course, right? There's some slight inflation, but there's also deflation because much of the velocity of that money, or the money moving around in the economy, isn't doing much of that yet, because all the banksters are holding on to it and putting it into the stock market, right? But we will see inflation in time. At least that's my opinion. There's a prevailing sentiment that the private banks and corporations engage in printing funds in an effort to prop up the inefficient and inherently corrupt business practices of corporate America, all at the expense of ordinary citizens. Bitcoin strips governments of their power to create more money. And a global world wants a global currency. Gold has no ideology and has maintained a stable value relative to goods and services for thousands of years, and I think Bitcoin might become the new digital gold. Not replace gold, but be sort of an adjunct to gold as a store of value as well. Most importantly, the majority of new generation do not accept the US as its leader or the dollar as its currency, and that's only getting worse right now. Frederick Hyde wrote, "I don't believe we shall ever have a good money again. We shall ever have a good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of government." And Milton Friedman, another economist, I think that the internet is going to be one of the major forces for reducing the role of government. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash. And you were saying that in 1999, and then 10 years later, we have Bitcoin. Maybe Milton Friedman is Satoshi Nakamoto. I say that jokingly, of course. Bitcoin allows for separation of money and state. If the government were a corporation we paid to provide these services, there would be no reason for them also to have control of our bank account, and that's an interesting way of putting it. Many argue that money should not be politicized. The wealth you work so hard to create should be intact regardless of the decisions of your government, whether it is to start a war, issue a bailout, or make a bad trade agreement. I agree, this is a great article, folks. Bitcoin is crucial. Cryptocurrencies are going to be fundamental. I think, as folks are saying, we're in the AOL and the Netscape days of the internet. So this is really great times. Ground zero, basically, of getting on board. Kraken explains impact if all 300 billion in stimulus checks was invested in Bitcoin. I just thought this was funny. If every stimulus check was used to buy Bitcoin, we'd see Bitcoin's market cap exceed $2 trillion or $100,000 per coin. I just bring that up just because I think it's fun. But, this is Forbes. Serious economic magazines are starting to take this seriously. Hedge funds are getting into the space. I think the future, the next 5-10 years are going to be the golden opportunities for cryptocurrencies generally. And now let's visit the 8-ball. Okay, so I thought we would ask the Magic 8-Ball if Ether will go to $2,095 by the end of 2021. As we see, that's what the smart money, the hedge funds, are paying Grayscale to buy into the Ether futures. So let's see. Will Ether go to $2,095 by the end of 2021? Yes, definitely, folks. I mean, what more information do you need? You heard it here first at the Black Letter. And the Magic 8-Ball said, yes, definitely, Ether will be worth over $2,000 by the end of 2021. Hey, this is just as good a guess as anyone else, as any of the other analysts. Anyway, thanks for joining me, folks. Sorry these videos get a bit longer. I'm going to really try cut them down to 10-15 minutes. I keep finding too much stuff that's interesting to think about and to contemplate. But I appreciate your support. Leave your comments down below. I'm very happy to discuss anything with you. Do you think Ether will go to over 2,000 by the end of next year? Let me know in the comments. And remember, in the meantime, dum spiro, spero.